Hello everybody, welcome back to Bare Basic Tech. Today we're going to be going over for loops and how to use them in a basic scenario. So for loops are designed to iterate over a provided sequence of some type, which can include data types such as lists, tuples, dictionaries, sets, or even strings. So these are basically built with four main components. You'll see a for keyword, a variable that's going to hold the iterable value, the keyword in, and then your actual sequence. So here I show a simple example of this build. So again, you have the for keyword, I, which will represent our variable that will hold the iterating value, in, and then this right here, range 5. So I'll explain what that is in a sec, but for now we'll go ahead and run play. So as you can see here, the for loop ran through 5 values, starting at 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, but not 5. So what's important to note here is that when you run range 5, what that tells the Python for the for loop is just to run 5 values from 0 up to and not including 5. So now if I put this here to change that, actually nothing would really change. So I'll show you in this case. Again, it'll run at 0 through 5. This is just another way of writing it. However, if you wanted to change the starting value, that's what that comma will do for you with the range keyword. So see 1, 2, 3, 4. Likewise, I can change this to a 6, and now it should go through 5. Right? So 1 through 5. So here we have another example for you where I have a list called SumList, which contains multiple random numbers up here. So if we were to run a for loop that would access each of these values, we would type this: for I in SumList, print I. And that will go through each item in the list and identify that value to I when it's working through that portion of the loop. So let's hit play and I'll show you. So as you can see, each time it iterates through, it'll print I at whatever value it is at that time. So first it'll do 432, then 431, then 51, then 1511, then 51. So let's say though I want to do something where I need to know the total number of iterations that go on in the loop, and for each of those I just want the index, right? So I just, instead of 432, 431, 51, and so on and so forth, I will just be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 through each of these iterations. And sometimes maybe you want this just for indexing purposes when you're making a loop. So let's try this and see what happens, right? Because as I showed you, like if you just do, in range, it should do that for us, right? Where it'll just give us some index type number. Well, unfortunately, it won't, because it sees this as a list directly and not something that can just be interpreted as an integer, as it says here, right? So what it's looking for is it wants one single number when you're using the range command, or at least from this number to this number, I should say. List doesn't really do that. This gives you multiple numbers in a list. So to fix that, we'd have to change it to look something a little different, like this. So what you would have to do, as shown here, is you'd have to get the length of some list and then use the range of that value. So again, what length will do is it'll look at some list and it will say, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things here. So this effectively becomes 5. And then there it'll go to range, and range will say, okay, range 5. So for I in range 5, print I. And it'll do that just like it did earlier for us. So 0 through 4. And again, if you really wanted to, you could do something like this where you could have it start at 2 and continue on through 4. So there's a simpler way to write this that's a little more known to be professional and can also give you the index value of everything. So this is using Enumerate. So what Enumerate essentially does is what we just discussed, but it combines them into just one single command. And also it will give you a tuple as an output where it gives the index as the first item and the actual value as the second. So let me show you what I mean. So if you go down here, this is what it outputs when you do enumerate, right? So as you can see here, it'll take some list and it'll assign each of its values to an index, and it will give you both out as a tuple, right? So you're saying, well, that's nice, but what if I just want one or the other? I don't want this tuple. I need just specifically either the indexes or the values. Well, that's fine. So what you would do is you'd write the same thing. However, you just need to change what your I value is going to be made of. So in this case, again, I gives you this tuple of the index and the value. So you need to assign it to do one or the other, and that's what this would be for here that I'm trying to show you. So I'm telling it I equals I1. So if you look at a tuple, right, the 0th value would be this first number in this case, and the 1 would be this. So therefore, this is going to print out all of your values from some list, as shown. Right? So you can go back, and if you wanted to do just the indexes, it'll do that as well. So where would you find this potentially useful? So for loops are useful when dealing with large or dynamic data sets. So for example, like an updated list of values with an unknown length at some sort of time. So let's say we have a list made up of ones that's like there's 1,000 ones in this list. That's what this line essentially does. That's all you need to know for the sake of this. Just understand this is a very long list, right? That's what I built here. So to go through all of those values that you don't have to by hand as the programmer, you can just use a for loop. So for I in enumerate my list, this will go through every single value in my list, all 1,000 of them, right? And look at that. It goes through all 1,000 numbers. Just to show you all the way to the top. So yeah, everything is there. So you can access any single thing in this list and do work on it, right? But this is useful if you need to do a mass update to all of these numbers, so you don't have to go back in yourself and do it, or type a line of code like, my list 0 equals 2, my list, so on. Like, you'll be here forever, right? So that's how you can use this, is to access all of these values very rapidly and do changes very quickly, right? Another example is string work, right? So for example, let's say we have a sentence here, and I need to find out how many S's are in this sentence, right? So I made a simple for loop that does this for us. So for I in sentence, I will represent the character, like this will iterate over every single character in this string. So we'll start with S and then O and then M, E, O, N, E, space, R, E, A, L, L, Y. Right? So it'll go by letter to letter through this whole string. And as it goes through, it'll look and see, okay, is the letter I'm currently on, is that an S? If so, I'm going to count that. And then I'm going to go on to the next letter. And it'll look if that's an S. And then it'll add one to the count. And it'll keep doing that through the whole sentence, right? Oops, misspelled tutorials. But anyway, so let's go ahead and see how many S's it can find here. Let's run that again. One more time. Okay, so the program found 5 S's in our sentence. So let's just go back and look and see what it did. So it found 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So our Python program is actually correct here and has found the correct number of S's. So again, you can see where this is a simple example, but how it can kind of come in handy, whether you're using large data sets here or you're using string work, or you're trying to like work through data. But that's essentially the basics of for loops. Thank you for watching, and if you like the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you.